What are ions? Ions are atoms or group of atoms that possess an electric charge. What is an electric charge? We have two major types of charges, which is the negative charge and the positive charge. So based on that, we can classify ions into two broad classes, which are the positive ions and the negative ions. The positive ions are the metallic ions, while the negative ions are the non-metallic ions. Metallic ions are the ions from metals, while non-metallic ions are the ions from non-metals. How then are positive ions produced, or how are positive ions generated? They are produced when metals undergo loss of electrons during ionization. That is, when ions or when elements ionize or when metals ionize in solution, they lose electrons to non-metals and they form positive ions. The common name for positive ions is called cations, meaning the ions that are found in the cathode in electrolysis. I hope when we'll be talking about electrolysis, we'll get to know more about cations and anions. What then are anions, having talked about cations? Anions are simply the negatively charged ions that are found at the anode. Of course, the anode is the positive electrode, while the cathode is the negative electrode. Taking us back to what we learned in our early days in the study of science, where we said like poles repel while unlike poles attract. So positive migrates to negative electrode, while the negative ions migrate to the positive electrode. That is very simple. Now, in the case of ions, here we have two major types of ions. During ionization, the positive elements or positive atoms tends to lose electrons to the negative elements and become positive charged, while the negative elements tend to gain electron from the positive elements and become negatively charged. In this case, the gain of electrons and the loss of electrons take place at the same time, or they take place simultaneously, meaning in every reaction there is always a gain of electron and also a loss of electron, just as in real life, where some persons are always on the losing side while others are always on the receiving side. It is very interesting to know that when metals lose electrons, they become oxidized, while when non-metals gain electrons, they become reduced. So oxidation is simply the loss of electrons, while reduction is the gain of electrons. So when an atom loses an electron, it becomes oxidized, while when an atom gains electrons, it becomes reduced. Having talked about that, let's take a look at some examples of positive ions. Examples of positive ions are, we have the sodium ion, written in simple form as sodium ion, indicating the charge as a positive ion. We also have the potassium ion, indicating the positive charge. We also have another example as the calcium ion. We have the magnesium ion. We have the aluminum ion. We have the zinc ion. We also have the lead-2 ion. We have iron-2 ion. Of course, iron has two major ions when it undergoes ionization. We have the iron-2 ion and the iron-3 ion, with both of them having different number of electrons. So we have iron-2 ion and iron-3 ion. Okay. We also have a copper-2 ion, indicating 2 electrons during ionization. So in all these cases, we can see that the sodium ion loses 1 electron during ionization, while potassium also loses 1 electron. In the case of calcium and magnesium ion, it loses 2 electrons each, while aluminium ion loses 3 electrons during ionization to become oxidized. Having talked about positive ions, let's talk about the negative ions that are called anions. Of course, we said anions are negatively charged ions that are produced through the gain of electrons. That is, when they gain electrons from the positive ions, they become reduced. And what we form is what we call the anions. Examples of anions are, we have the chloride ion, we also have the bromide ion, we have the iodide ion. All these are examples of negative ions or anions. Also have the hydroxide ion consisting of 2 atoms, oxygen and hydrogen. That is why we define an ion as an atom. It can be a single atom or a group of atoms that have electric charge. So we also have here trioxonitrate 5 ion as an example of a negative ion or anion. We also have tetraoxosulfate 6 ion. We also have trioxochlorate 5 ion, and as an example of a negative ion or anion. We also have tetraoxomanganate 7 ion. So you have tetraoxomanganate 7 as an example of a negative ion or as an example of an anion. So all these and more are some of the examples of ions. So with that, we've come to the end of today's class on anions and cations. I hope to see you in our next class, where we'll be discussing on another concept still on particulate nature of matter. Hope to see you then.